You're watching the Monday edition of Plain Speak with me, Poonam Burde. Is Canada a breeding ground for anti-India propaganda? Is the Justin Trudeau government turning a blind eye to blatant insult of a democratic sovereign nation which is India? I asked those questions tonight because in a span of 2 months, there have been 2 referendums that were held by a pro-Khalistani organization in Canada. And the government there seems to be turning a blind eye to these. Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon, a man who is wanted in India in multiple terror cases, enjoys haven in Canada. He sits on foreign soil, he spews venom against India and pushes forth a false narrative of a separate Khalistan. A dream that he can only harbour till death, only for it to be unrealised. But the onus tonight lies on the Trudeau government to put an end to this campaign against India, a campaign that seems to be running ad nauseum for months together, especially in the last few months. To ensure no Khalistani flags or any anti-India posters crop up, it is the onus, it is the responsibility and the job of the Trudeau government and the local administrations to ensure that does not happen. And it's not because of this one particular instance why we're asking those questions. Let me try and shed some light on what the last few years have looked like in Canada as far as this anti-India propaganda is concerned. Now, as far as 2015 is concerned, there were at least 4 members of Trudeau's cabinet that were linked to Khalistan backers. In 2017, the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau himself attended Toronto Kirtan where there were Khalistani flags. Unfortunately, there was no comment that came to the fore from Trudeau or anybody from his government. That same year, Trudeau again addressed a Khalsa Day parade which had Bindranwale floats. Again, all we heard was silence after that. In 2018, a convicted Khalistani terrorist, Jaspal Atwal, was invited to Trudeau's reception here in India. 2 years later, cut to 2020, what happens? Justin Trudeau comes out and backs farmers' protests here in India that were protesting against the 3 farm legislations. Protests that we do know were at some point hijacked by certain vested interests. Justin Trudeau came out and voiced his opinion about a protest, about a legislation that is only the business of India, a democratic country. That is why we're asking questions of the Canadian government and of Justin Trudeau. Canada is also being accused of double standards. Let me tell you why. Because on one hand, the Canadian government claims that Canada does not support or recognize a so-called Khalistan referendum. But what's the reality? We know that at least 2 referendums have been held in just the last 2 months. The first stage was in September, where the pro-Khalistani organizations felt that wasn't enough. There were more people that wanted to come out and vote, which is why another one was held just yesterday. Now, on the face of it, the Canadian government claims that it respects sovereignty, unity and territorial integrity of India, a friendly nation. What's the chilling reality, unfortunately, is that anti-India posters, anti-Hindu posters are seen plastered and spotted across multiple cities, especially in Brampton, where we also had the mayor face the wrath of the people. And that's really the big problem here, which is why we're asking the question plainly. Why is there an anti-India tirade in Canada, and is the government there turning a blind eye to that?
Our position on the efforts by anti-Indian elements to hold a so-called Khalistan referendum is well known. It has been conveyed to the Canadian government both in New Delhi and in Canada.
Why are we seeing a rise in these instances? Why is there a campaign against India? Is there one? And what is the government doing to tackle it there in Canada? Those are the questions we'll find answers to here on this broadcast. Former diplomat Ashok Sajjanhar now joins me on this broadcast. Dr. Monica Verma, who's a strategic affairs expert, will also be joining us shortly. Kuldeep Singh Shekhawat, who's the director of MATV, will be joining us as well. But I want to ask my first question to Jaswant Singh Thekedar, who's the Prabandhak of Gurudwara Miri Piri in London. And this issue of pro-Khalistani sympathizers, pro-Khalistani members hitting out on the streets is not just limit it to Canada. We are seeing that in the UK as well. But with Canada, there seems to be a free run that seems to be given there, isn't it? Ashok Sajjanhar, I'd like to get you started on this debate with the diplomatic angle of it. India has registered a strong protest multiple times. Just a few days ago, India said that we have spoken to Canada. They have assured us that there is absolutely no support coming in and they do not recognize these Khalistani referendums that are being held on Canadian soil. Then what is stopping them from putting an end to it? Mr. Sajjanhar? I believe we do not have that line with Ashok Sajjanhar. We'll try and reconnect with him and all of our other guests as well. But Jaswant Singh Tekadar is also with me on this broadcast. And like we were discussing, it is about Canada, it is about UK, it is about the larger malice, and that really is the problem. But why are we seeing a rise in these kind of acts, in these kind of Khalistani sympathizers trying to whip up sentiment in multiple parts of the country, of late, especially in Canada? Jaswant Singh?
Hello.
Yes, sir, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Hello.
Mr. Tekadar, can you hear me?
Hello.
I believe we do not have that link with Mr. Tekadar either. We'll try and reconnect with all our guests as we get you this big story coming in from Canada, where there are multiple instances coming to the fore of anti-India sentiment being whipped up. The most recent one is that of a Khalistani referendum, a second one at that in just 2 months. We're seeing clashes that erupted, we're seeing temples being defaced, we're seeing a campaign against Hindutva as well. But all we're seeing from the government of the day, which is the Trudeau government in Canada, is silence. And that's the most unfortunate bit, because on one hand, they say that they believe in India's sovereignty, unity and territorial integrity. But when there is an attempt to question those exact principles as far as India is concerned, there's absolute silence. Ashok Sajjanhar, I believe, is back with us on this broadcast. And Mr. Sajjanhar, like I was asking you, diplomatically, India and Canada have had friendly relations. We consider each other allies. But when something like this happens, when Canada says, yes, we do accept that you're a sovereign nation, we'll do everything to protect it, but on the other hand, do nothing when it happens on your own soil.
No, absolutely. You're very right. I'm sorry I wasn't audible earlier. Yes, you're very right. Because I think in terms of saying Canada says all the right things, but then it doesn't walk the talk. And we have seen it multiple times, and not only this time, particularly, I think since the time that Mr. Justin Trudeau has won the elections and he has been the Prime Minister, we are quite aware of, when he visited India himself. And basically, his focus, his eye was not so much on strengthening relations with India, bilateral ties with India, but how to milk the whole, his actions in terms of reaching out to the potential voters in his own country. So here also, what I see is that basically it is vote bank politics. He doesn't want to fall on the wrong side of the electorate. He considers it to be a significant electorate, his supporters, and that is why he will say the right things. The Canadian establishment will say the right things, but they will not lift a little finger to stamp this out. As you said very correctly, on the 18th of September, we had a referendum. More than 100,000 Sikhs in Canada participated in this referendum. Yesterday also, more than 75,000 Sikhs have participated. And there are all these hate crimes, there are all these criminal activities that have been going on in the country, and Canada is, the Canadian government is doing nothing at all. And even when we had in India the, against the farm laws, the stir by the Kisan, the protests, the demonstrations, Canada had no role to play in that, but looking at its own vote bank, it was making statements like there should be freedom to protest, freedom to demonstrate, peaceful demonstrations should not be snubbed out. And I think we have seen what
and there
Canada
too we
did
saw the
itself
kind of
when
duplicity
the
that came to the
truckers
fore.
had,
Exactly, when the truckers' protest was happening there, and the kind of reaction that came to the fore when that was happening was completely contradictory to the lessons that were being preached to India, when there was something internal that was being discussed on the streets of India. But Canada decided to have a view back then. Why do they not then have a view about the kind of anti-India activities that go on right under their nose? That's the question many in India are asking. And I request you to stay on with me because Jaswant Singh Thekadar is also now with me on this broadcast. Jaswant Singh जी, मुझे आपसे ये पूछना है कि गुरपतवंत सिंह पन्नून पाकिस्तान का जो रिश्ता है, जो आजाद खालिस्तान का सपना दिखा रहे हैं गुरपतवंत सिंह पन्नू कनाडा में बैठ के,
हाँ जी,
ये सपना कभी पूरा नहीं हो सकता।
हाँ जी, क्या पूछना? हाँ जी,
गुरपतवंत सिंह पन्नून पाकिस्तान के साथ मिलकर जो ये आजाद खालिस्तान का सपना दिखाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं लोगों को, ये जो रेफरेंडम्स लिए जा रहे हैं, ये सपना कभी पूरा नहीं हो सकता।
ये तो एक पैसों की खेड है जी, ये कोई खालिस्तान की गल थोड़ी है
जी।
ये तो लोगों को मूर्ख बनाने वास्ते, पैसे इकट्ठे करने वास्ते वो अपनी दुकानदारी चला रहा है। इतना खालिस्तान का कोई संबंध नहीं गा
जी।
और जी गवांढी देश की एक्टिविटीज आ पिछले 40 साल तो वो सानू खराब कर रहा वा, और सिखां दे सिर दे उत्ते वो विरोधी प्रचार करके ते सिखां नूं भी मरवा रहा ते अपने जिहड़े एजेंट पैदा कीते होए आ उन्हां दे रही सिखां दे विच दुविधा पा रहा
जी।
और ਇਹਦਾ ना खालसा बन सकता, ना ये रेफरेंडम कभी कबूल हो सकता ते ना ये रेफरेंडम हैगा। ये गुरुद्वारिਆਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ, ਅਮਰੀਕਨ, यूके ਦੇ ਪਾਸਪੋਰਟ ਹੋਲਡਰ ਵੋਟਾਂ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਪਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਨੇ
ਜੀ।
ਜੇ ਰੈਫਰੈਂਡਮ ਹੋਊਗਾ ਤਾਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ 'ਚ ਹੋਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਲੋਕ ਜਾਂ ਇੰਡੀਅਨ ਲੋਕ ਉੱਥੇ ਵੋਟ ਪਾਉਣ। ਇਹ ਦੂਜੇ ਦੇਸ਼ਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਿਟੀਜ਼ਨ ਆ ਉਹ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਵੋਟ ਪਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ? ਉਹ ਵੀ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਿਆਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੈਠ ਕੇ। ਇਹ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਬੜਾ ਵੱਡਾ ਧੋਖਾ ਦੇ ਰਿਹਾ, ਉਹ ਸਿਰਫ ਇਹਦੇ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਉਹਦੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਕਮਾਈ ਦਾ ਸਾਧਨ ਹੈ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਖੋ ਰਸ਼ੀਆ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਸਟੇਟਾਂ ਤੇ ਅਜੇ ਕਬਜ਼ਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਯੂਕਰੇਨ ਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ, ਉਹਨੇ ਰੈਫਰੈਂਡਮ ਕਰਾਇਆ, ਉਸ ਦੇਸ਼ ਨੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਅੱਜ ਤੱਕ ਯੂਐਨ ਨੂੰ ਐਕਸੈਪਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੀ
ਜੀ,
ਤੇ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਕਿਦਾਂ ਕਰ ਲੇਗੀ?
जी बिल्कुल। और अब रशिया यूक्रेन की बात कर रहे हैं, एंड आई वुड लाइक टू गेट कुलदीप सिंह शेखावत as well, because these kind of referendums and the idea to whip up sentiment by organizations like Sikh for Justice is not new. It's not new to Canada either, and it's happened in multiple parts of the world as well. But what's interesting is when there was this referendum that Russia was conducting in Ukraine, Justin Trudeau came out and said that that's not acceptable. You cannot do so. Why then is he silent on these kind of referendums that are being held on his soil against a friendly nation, against a country where they say that we will completely accept your sovereign right, your territorial integrity, but turn a blind eye to what's happening on our soil because it doesn't suit our narrative?
Hello.
Mr. Shekhawat, can you hear me?
Suits them, they will agree to that. What doesn't suit them, they won't agree to that. That doesn't have Canada, so they will agree to what they feel is right. Referendums, and that too in Canada, how does it impact India? It doesn't impact India in any way. So who's going to accept it? Nobody. It's not going to go to any organized.
We'll try and reconnect that line with Mr. Shekhawat there. I believe he's traveling, which is why we're losing that link with him. But Dr. Monica Verma, as far as the relationships between Canada and India is concerned, India has made it very, very clear. We've registered strong protests on multiple occasions as far as these kind of attacks are happening on temples, the kind of narrative that is being peddled there, where they're having these how Hindutva is fascist and how the RSS is leading to violence. They're having these kind of campaigns. We have posters of anti-Hindu, anti-India narrative that keep cropping up in parts of Canada, and yet there is absolutely no action. As far as diplomatically stepping up is concerned, where does that leave India now? Because something surely needs to be done by the Indian government.
Actually, if we look at it closely, India is not only issuing warnings, but it has also taken certain credible steps when it comes to registering its protests. So a referendum took place on 18th of September, I believe, the last one, not this one, but the previous one. And at that time, India had issued a travel advisory saying that, if you are going to Canada, then it's not a safe place to go because of the entire Khalistani extremism. So I think that travel advisory, we all know how popular Canada is in India, and so many, business travelers and then students and other, people for different reasons, they are always traveling to Canada. And in fact, Canada is also looking at certain sort of trade or economic gain with India. When Justin was visiting India, he was trying to meet our Prime Minister and, all the important people so that India-Canada relations could become more important. They could, grow into something more meaningful. But due to Canada not simply respecting India's sovereignty, India's territorial integrity, I think it's going to be a huge issue. And when it comes to the entire strategy of Indo-Pacific, if we look at India, India has become a very important player in this part of the world. And if Canada cannot do that, then I think it's going to jeopardize Canada's national interest going further.
Right. So, Ashok Sajjanhar, it is really in Canada's interest to, turn this around, to take a greater stand as far as these kind of instances are concerned. Also because the kind of relationship that both the countries share, yes, also the personal rapport that the Prime Minister shares with several of the world leaders, including Justin Trudeau. That is something that they will have to now start to act on. That's one aspect of it. Another aspect is this man who sits on Canadian soil, Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon, but it's not just Canada who is not acting against him, because we've tried to get an Interpol red corner notice against him as well, not once but at least on 3 different occasions, and that too hasn't fructified. How then do we move forward?
No, you're very right. First point, I think what Mr. Trudeau is doing is, shooting himself in the foot, because he knows even these people, the Khalistanis, as your earlier 2 panelists said, that all these referenda, etc., they are not going to lead anywhere. And Mr. Trudeau should also realize it, that, it's not really going to take this whole referendum issue anywhere. So, and the only outcome of this is that Canada is spoiling its relations with India. Today, India is the 5th largest economy. In another 6-7 years, it's going to be the 3rd largest economy. And Canada would definitely, all the countries would definitely need not only India's market, but also in terms of technological cooperation. India is the fastest growing major economy in the world. So I think, and there are a large number of Indians, the Indian diaspora in Canada is also very significant, leaving aside these Sikh Khalistani supporting elements there. So I think it is doing itself a disservice by by giving encouragement to these elements and not reaching out to India and strengthening relations, multifaceted relations across the board with India. As far as getting Pannu and the others, those against whom we have asked for Interpol, you would recall that very recently there was this international meeting of the Interpol countries and officials that was held in India. And I think the verdict that came out of there, maybe, there is, because issuing an Interpol notice is a technical sort of an issue. It's not really all that political an issue. So we need to provide all the information, provide all the details, because this is what the head of the Interpol at that time had said, right, that, some of the other individuals also against whom we wanted Interpol red corner notice to be issued, that there were some technical details that were missing. So I think India needs to, I'm certain that these are very legally accurate and exact documents that have to be furnished. So maybe India needs to do that, and we should be able to get there. But also we should continue to apply pressure on the governments that these elements are not given a free run, whether it is in Canada or it is in the United States or it is in the United Kingdom. We have seen that in the United Kingdom there has been a report that has been come from a think tank which has completely rubbished that there were any sort of Hindu terrorist elements or RSS sponsored elements that were involved in this rioting, etc., in Birmingham or Leicester. So I think we need to work with the governments also and take it forward accordingly, but also on the national level, on the international stage, also focus on the fact that these are terrorist elements and all countries need to work together to take action against these. Puna.
Absolutely. He's wanted for terrorist acts here in India. He's a wanted man, this Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon, and yet he roams around freely. He spews venom. He spews this propaganda, false narrative. और जसवंत सिंह जी, मैं आपसे फिर से यही पूछना चाहूंगी कि कनाडा में अभी हम देख रहे हैं, लेकिन ये यूके में भी हो रहा था. यूके में भी कई जगह पे ये रेफरेंडम किया जा रहा था. इसी साल बिल्कुल जनवरी में भी हमने देखा ये. ऐसी क्या वजह है कि बार बार ये रेफरेंडम के कॉल्स उठते हैं? ऐसे कौन लोग हैं जो अपने वेस्टेड इंटरेस्ट के लिए ये जो एंटी इंडिया नैरेटिव है इसको जगाए रखें?
दो तरह के लोग है जी. एक जिन्हों ने पोलीटिकल साइलम लैनी आ, वो अपने आप शो करते भी अं खालिस्तानी आ. नंबर दो, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲੋਕ ਇੱਥੇ ਬੈਠੇ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਕਦੀ ਵੀ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਜਾਣਾ, ਉਹ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਿਆਂ 'ਚ ਬੈਠੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਿਆਂ 'ਚ ਚੁੱਕ ਕੇ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਿਆਂ 'ਚ ਰੈਫਰੈਂਡਮ ਕਰਾਉਂਦੇ ਆ. ਉਹ ਵਿਹਲੇ ਲੋਕ ਆ, ਬਜ਼ੁਰਗ ਲੋਕ, ਉਹ ਤੁਰ ਪੈਂਦੇ ਆ, ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕੀ ਜੀ, ਉੱਥੇ ਚਾਹ ਪਾਣੀ ਮੁਫਤ ਮਿਲ ਜਾਂਦਾ. ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਨਾ ਤਾਂ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਨੁਕਸਾਨ ਆ, ਇੰਡੀਆ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਦਾ ਕੁਝ ਨਹੀਂ ਵਿਗੜਦਾ. ਇਹ ਸਿਰਫ ਇਹਦੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਦੁਕਾਨਦਾਰੀ ਪੈਸੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਆ, ਪੈਸੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਉਹ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ. ਦੂਜੀ ਗੱਲ ਆ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਕੋਈ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹਾ ਅਸਲੀਅਤ ਦੱਸਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਲੋਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਸਮਝਾਉਣ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਮੂਰਖ ਬਣਾ ਕੇ ਪੈਸੇ ਕਮਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਗਵਾਂਢੀ ਦੇਸ਼ ਕੋਲੋਂ. ਜੇ ਇਹ ਕੁਝ ਲੋਕ ਜੇ ਇਹ ਪੈਸੇ ਦੇ ਜ਼ੋਰ ਨਾਲ, ਐਡਵਰਟਾਈਜ਼ ਦੇ ਜ਼ੋਰ ਨਾਲ ਇਹ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਾ ਸਕਦਾ, ਤੇ ਇਹਦੇ ਲੋਕ ਉਲਟ ਵੀ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ. ਜੇ ਕੋਈ ਪੈਸਾ ਜਿੰਨਾ ਕੋ ਹੋਏ ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਖਰਚਣ, ਐਡਵਰਟਾਈਜ਼ ਕਰਨ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਲੋਕ ਗਲਤ ਆ. ਯੂਕੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਿਰਫ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੋਂ ਸਵਾ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਆਦਮੀ ਇਦਾਂ ਦਾ ਨਹੀਂਗਾ. ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਖਾਲਿਸਤਾਨੀ ਜਥੇਬੰਦੀਆਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਚਲੋ ਜੀ ਖਾਲਿਸਤਾਨ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਤਾਂ ਕਰੀ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਨਾ ਜੀ, ਚੰਗਾ ਮਾੜਾ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਪਤਾ, ਕੁਝ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦਾ, ਵੀ ਖਾਲਿਸਤਾਨ ਤੇ ਕਰੀ ਜਾਂਦਾ. ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਹ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਵਾ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਅਸਲੀਅਤ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਤੱਕ ਪਹੁੰਚਾਏ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਖਰਾਬ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਲੇ ਲੋਕ ਨੇ. ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਹ ਕੋਈ ਨਾ ਖਾਲਿਸਤਾਨ ਬਣਨਾ, ਨਾ ਇਹ ਰੈਫਰੈਂਡਮ ਦੀ ਕੋਈ ਵੈਲਿਊ ਆ, ਜਾਂ ਤੇ ਦਾ ਕੋਈ ਕਿਤੇ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੋਏ ਤੇ ਦੱਸੋ ਦੁਨੀਆ 'ਚ. ਜੇ ਜੰਮੂ ਕਸ਼ਮੀਰ ਦਾ ਰੈਫਰੈਂਡਮ ਸੀ, ਉਹਦਾ ਕੀ ਬਣਿਆ? ਉਹ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ. ਆ ਜਰੂਸ ਦਾ ਰੈਫਰੈਂਡਮ ਕੀ ਬਣਿਆ? ਉਹ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ, ਮੰਨ ਲਿਆ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ. ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲੀਗਲੀ ਰੈਫਰੈਂਡਮ ਆ ਉਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੋਕੀ ਮੰਨਦੇ, ਤੇ ਇਹ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਿਆਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੈਠ ਕੇ ਬਾਹਰ ਦੀ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਮੈਂਬਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਨਾਲ ਰੈਫਰੈਂਡਮ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਹੋ ਜਾਊਗਾ? ਇਹ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਿਆਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੈਠਾ ਕਰੀ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਮੂਰਖ ਬਣਾ ਲਿਆ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ. ਜੇ ਉੱਥੇ 500 ਬੰਦਾ ਆਏ ਤੇ 5000 ਕਹਿੰਦਾ, ਜੇ 1000 ਬੰਦਾ ਹੋਏ ਤੇ
Sikhs are just being misled by people like Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon, by organizations like Sikhs for Justice. And Dr. Verma, it's not just about the Canadian government that needs to act, but it's also about what stand the Indian government can take. Like Thekedar ji was also pointing out, perhaps we also need to have a stronger mechanism to reach out to people and tell them that this really is nothing but you being misled. There is absolutely no truth to this ever becoming a reality. This man is making money at your expense, and that's all that is there to it.
I think that's a very good.
ਸ਼ਰਾਬ ਪੀਂਦਾ, ਸਿਗਰਟਾਂ ਪੀਂਦਾ, ਤੇ ਇਹ ਸਿੱਖ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ? ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮੋਨਾ ਹੋਏ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵਾਲ ਕਟਾਉਂਦਾ ਹੋਏ ਔਰ ਸਿੱਖ ਵੀ ਨਾ ਹੋਏ, ਕਿ ਉਹ ਸਿੱਖ, ਜੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਖਾਲਿਸਤਾਨ, ਜੇ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦਾ, ਉਹ ਆਪ ਤਾਂ ਸਿੱਖ ਹੈ ਨਹੀਂ, ਲੋਕੀ ਤਾਂ ਵੀ ਮੂਰਖ ਬਣੇ ਹੋਏ ਆ. ਸਿਰਫ ਉਹਦੇ ਪ੍ਰਾਪੇਗੰਡਾ ਉਹਦਾ ਇੰਨਾ ਵਾ गुरुद्वारे दे विच या टीवी रेडियो ते प्रोपेगेंडा करदा.
पन्नून जैसे लोगों को बस अपनी फिक्र है और किसी के कोई बिगर कॉज नहीं है. एंड दैट रियली, मोनिका वर्मा, इज द पॉइंट दैट नीड्स टू बी ड्रिवन होम. And perhaps there needs to be a better mechanism to do that as well. Something perhaps the Indian government should also look at.
I think a huge plus with this government is the way it is reaching out to the diasporic communities. Wherever Narendra Modi is visiting, whichever country he goes to, he always makes a point that some sort of an event is organized where these members of the diasporic community are able to attend and listen to his vision. So I think, something similar is possible in the case of Canada as well, where an outreach maybe is not possible at the topmost level, but we can put certain levers, we can, pull certain levers, and maybe we can, do some sort of action where this message can be sent to the people of Indian community or people from the Sikh community specifically in Canada, that this is not going to lead anywhere. Because look, Indian Punjab is right now on the path of prosperity. It's a known fact that India itself is becoming a huge economy, and your stake, your destiny is linked to this India. And if you talk about things, that ISI is sponsoring this entire referendum, or Pakistan is trying to, draw a wedge between the Hindu community and the Sikh community. If you try to, get into all these kinds of conspiracy theories and all these kinds of demands, then it is not going to be good for your own future. I'm sure these people, when they are visiting India, they are also seeking Indian visa. There are so many other mechanisms through which government can make sure that if you are signing up for causes like these, then you will not be allowed on Indian soil ever. I think that's the kind of thing that all states do. That China does it. China may not be a very good example, but other democracies, if you look at them, since India is a democracy, within a democracy only, there are certain mechanisms that we can use and make sure that if you are signing up for the cause of Khalistan, no matter which country you are in, please don't, expect that you'll come to India next and we'll welcome you.
Right. So diplomatically, if nothing else, Ashok Sajjanhar, screws need to be tightened. At some level or the other, it needs to be done. If not at the government level, not at the highest level, at some level, there needs to be some sort of screening mechanism that if you are someone who actively voices your opinion about being in favor of a separate Khalistan or are indulged in any sort of anti-India acts, then you will have to pay the price for it. There will be repercussions.
No, absolutely. I think there are a large number of ways in which, in parallel, we need to operate, and I'm sure it's happening. But maybe it needs to be further strengthened. It needs to be further energized because one is in terms of the narrative. We have to build a narrative that all this, what they are trying to do, this is fraud, has no future at all, there's no possibility whatsoever, and that they are all being taken for a ride when they are going in for these referenda and so on and so forth. The other is, I think we have to use the policies of, what is known as Sam Dam Dand Bhed. And in terms of many of these, those who have Canadian citizenship, they want Indian visas. And now we have been able to identify a large number of them. They can be blacklisted, of course, if they are working against the territorial integrity and sovereignty of your country. Then, of course, we are not going to be welcoming them to our country. So they can be blacklisted. They will not be allowed to come to India. Even as far as Indians are concerned, when I'm sure we are aware. And if they come here, they can be sort of, I'm sure the government has a large number of avenues so that, we can reach out to them, we can counsel them, we can tell them. So there are very many different ways. Our High Commission possibly needs to be more proactive in reaching out to all these. The Indian community which is there, because we've seen just yesterday, in Brampton, the mayor was booed and he was shot down because of all these pro-Khalistani posters. Right. So that community which is totally opposed to such a referenda and to such activities on the soil of Canada, because, all this leads to hate crime, all this leads to criminal action, as we've seen even in the United Kingdom. Of course, that was being done by another community there in the United Kingdom, in Leicester and Birmingham. But here it is the same community, and it leads to problems as far as our own Indian community is concerned. So I think they can get together and their own elected representatives, they can reach out to them and try to make sure that such activities at the local level are also not allowed, not encouraged, and are put down with a very strong hand.
Absolutely, the stronger measures are needed at all levels. Diplomatically, yes, India also needs to raise this. Perhaps the High Commission needs to lodge a stronger protest like they have been. There were advisories that were also issued for students, especially in Canada, right after we saw spate of attacks on temples being burglarized across the country of Canada. We saw these kind of posters come up. We saw these kind of protests even on the eve of Diwali, where we saw two groups that almost came to blows in a parking lot. It was a mob of 500 to 700 strong men who were chanting slogans for a separate Khalistan, and all the police could do was stand there and watch on as mute spectators. That happened in Canada. even to that incident, we've had absolutely no remark or no response coming to the fore from the government there, and that's really the unfortunate bit. So there has to be a tighter hand as far as dealing with this issue is concerned, both diplomatically and in other ways. But the message needs to be sent out loud and clear, and I'm sure the Indian government is looking to do that. But for now, we are hoping that someone from the Canadian government, if no one else, then at least the High Commissioner here in India comes out and clarifies why his government is silent on all this. I thank my panelists for joining us here on this broadcast with your perspective.